Welcome to the Cloudless Mind podcast about neuroscience and non-duality. Introducing your hosts, Paul Smit and Scott Byrd.
Well, welcome back to the Cloudless Mind podcast. Paul and I are here today from a different point of view, a little bit different than we normally have been engaged with you. We actually have no idea what's going to come out of our mouths right now. We've come without a topic. So, Paul, I'm really curious to see what's going to come out of your mouth. Let's see it.
Well, that is the most interesting thing there is, that you never know what you're going to say. I mean, unless you're reading it from paper. But in a normal conversation, words simply come out. And after that, you become aware of your own words. So if you are talking to me, I become aware of your words. But when I'm talking, I'm also becoming aware of my words. So there's actually no distinction between that. The only distinction is that whenever words come out of this mouth, my brain creates the idea that I am the one that created those words. But you're not. Speaking happens automatically, and afterwards you become aware.
So what you're saying is that the neocortex is so fast, it captures your attention and tells you in your brain without you, like it's so fast that you can't even distinguish that this actually is just happening. You think that you're happening. It seizes you to some degree to make you think that you're the one that's actually doing that. There is a you that's doing this, correct?
It's the same thing whenever someone throws a ball at you and then with one reflex you catch the ball. That's, of course, the unconscious brain activity that does the reflex. And afterwards, you become aware, oh, I caught the ball. And then the brain is so fast, it creates the idea, look at me, how wonderful I am. I catch the ball. I'm amazing. And it creates a whole story about it. But if you wouldn't have catched the ball and it would have hit your head, you would be like, oh, shit, I'm so slow.
Yeah.
But in both cases, you are not in control.
Obviously, this is one of the most, I think, one of the greatest rabbit hole discussions of all time. And before we get into that, I'd love to ask your idea or thoughts on why this conversation, first of all, is one that's not had more often. Like, what would have us not be in this conversation about what you just said? And then what would be the implications after we discuss that? What would actually be the implications in knowing this at a deep level? Like, what's the usefulness of knowing this?
Yeah, but there are a lot of, let's say, side effects from understanding this. But for me personally, when I realized that this thing called Paul is simply happening and that nothing in life can be different from what it is, because we are all energy at play. So our brain is simply energy being programmed in a certain way, and it just does what it does. And afterwards, our brain creates the sensation as if I am the one who did everything. So it creates the idea that I create my thoughts, that I make my own decisions, and I do my own actions. While we now know from neuroscience that actually it's all the unconscious part of the brain, which is like 99% of all activity, does everything, and our awareness is very, very limited. We're only aware of one thing at a time, and it also has a slight delay. So actually we live a fraction of a second in the past, even. If you look at it, that's what Sam Harris says too. So the implication is that when you think you are this I, then all those clouds arise. Because if something goes wrong, you get frustrated. You're already afraid of what might be happening. You feel guilty about the things you did. You blame other people. But once this realization gets integrated, then in time, all those thoughts of worry, all this anxiety can dissolve. And then life still goes on, but it's so much more relaxed.
Right. You can kind of, as I say quite often, you can travel over the terrain of life in a totally different manner than what most people
Yes.
do. You walk kind of lightly over it. But, I'm very fascinated by why this isn't a conversation that's like so prevalent. That's because it's like the answer to almost everything that everyone would experiencing anxiety, experiencing most of what people would term the negative experiences of life there could be a whole new way of experiencing them if this conversation was present. So,
Yes.
what do you think has this not be like a really typical conversation, like something that you would immediately go into a company? I'll tell you from my perspective. I'd love to hear yours first. Why isn't every company in the world from the top down speaking about what we're speaking about?
Because it has never been part of our conditioning. It has never been part of our belief system. It was originated 600 years before Christ in India. It written down in the Upanishads. And there was never the intention to make this a religion, which it isn't, obviously, because it has no rules, it has nothing. It's just pointing to one simple concept without even pretending it to be the truth. So what for centuries what happened is that actually, like with the Zen monks, that a teacher would teach the student, and then the student would teach again. So it was all one by one, and so hardly anyone knew about it. I mean, and especially in the Western world, when we are all so identified and everything is built around, especially now with social media, that you are the one that has to be the greatest, most beautiful, successful person in the world and show it to everyone. So everyone is so identified these days. That's also why everyone's mentally so struggling. So I totally agree on what you say. This way of looking at the world and yourself could be so liberating for so many people.
Well, it's like, again, I've said it in the past, it's like the bowling ball that knocks down so many of the issues. And but my fascination is, and it goes all the way back to like even so many would argue that this is exactly what you and I are discussing is what Jesus spoke about. He was basically speaking in a different way, but when you start to go down that place, look what happened to him. When you go to that, there's this built-in thing at some level. It feels like that his message, in my opinion, got bastardized and got more commercialized to be more of a control mechanism. But what he was really speaking about in many ways is what you and I are speaking of, and we are basically, look, he got put on the cross. You look at a Martin Luther King, he gets killed. Anyone who comes to this level of, truth, let's say, it's really kind of frowned upon. But I think that might be shifting. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what Bill Hicks also said in his show. That's the why that every time someone brings the truth and says, hey, people, relax, don't worry, don't be afraid, it's just a ride, we kill those people.
Every time.
Every time. But this is also, I mean, I love talking about this subject with you, even if it's just for a small audience, but it's liberating to talk about it because normally you can't talk about this also in companies because the amount of resistance is insane.
Yes.
And I'm happy to see that my friends, a couple of my friends are neuroscientists, and to them, this is just from a scientific perspective, a logical thing.
Yes.
Even with neuromarketers, they know that there's not an I inside your brain doing it, that there's no such thing as free will, and that, thanks to that, also, I think this message is becoming more common, and thanks to guys like Sam Harris, who's also not the typical guru,
Right.
So people more and more start to bring in this message. So I think slowly there will be a bit more openness to it.
Yeah.
What's your thought about it?
Well, my thought is, yes, what it will take is, if you're looking at the way the human mind works, it will take, first of all, some people that are considered authoritative figures that that they feel comfortable being in that story, sharing that same story, especially because they're kind of exalted. So if we get lucky and Sam Harris doesn't get killed, although I got to be honest, he has a real concern. I've heard him talk about that because he talks the truth about things like Islamism or about different types of religious belief structures that opened him up to at any point being kind of a this figure that's saying stuff that threatens everything that people believe. But also too, I mean, when we talk about this, Paul, it in many ways it goes against everything that we would ever talk about with a company. Because see, companies create these values, and they create these leadership models and all of that. And if you hear what we're talking about here, in many ways, this just blows it apart. I mean, it would have any of that stuff occur as like, wait a minute. Is this actually the most useful and productive and powerful way to create performance by just telling people what to do? Well, if you come from this conversation we're talking about, you would definitely see it from a different place. So it would really threaten almost so many of the structures that are in place right now.
Yeah, what you see is people are first being filled with clouds. So there's this anxiety. And then with all these clouds, we try to maneuver the company in a certain direction, which is a big struggle. So first taking away people's clouds so there can actually be flow and creativity and connection, this is the basis of everything. But I think that things are changing. Look at yourself. You are a coach in big companies talking about this stuff. That is very rare.
Well, incredibly rare, yeah.
Yeah, most coaches, they go for the self-improvement, and there's nothing wrong about that. But if you are not first awake, then you're just identified more and more, and you will keep in the same loop again and again. So it's rare that it happens.
Well, first thing I'm trying not to do is get killed, by the way. So, I've got to be careful when I talk. No, but really, but see, this is a lot about, why I think, so my way of dealing with that, because I come with a really radical message. Although in the beginning, when I'm working with my clients, it doesn't appear as a radical message. What they're basically focusing on is me. Like their experience of being in the room with me, or their experience in having a conversation with me. So once that kind of, that will break down at some level, that'll satisfy certain parts of the brain, and there's a trust factor or whatever.
Yes,
I don't actually know what it means. And then what I typically will do is I'll introduce this whole idea from the perspective of patterns.
Yeah.
Simple patterns that repeat over and over energetically, that we're simply energy patterning, we're energy at play. And so that's not as threatening to most people when I come from that place. But essentially, when I'm speaking, I'm speaking exactly what you and I are talking, but there's a creative way of talking about it, which has it not just have them get on the defensive immediately, Yeah. But and if I've been successful, what it does is it just starts to create really powerful questions that they've never considered before.
Yeah.
Have you, in your I'm curious because we've talked in the past about the sort of the evolution of this message in different parts of the world. How have you seen, because I'm curious, sort of looking in the future, what could be here in the States, how have you seen this kind of evolve in your work? You've been working with companies for 10, 12 years, you've been speaking. Have you seen an evolution from the top that's been more accepting of this message?
I think hardly anyone brings this message in companies. That's also the criticism we get, like, oh, gurus these days have become businessmen. That's
Exactly.
what someone wrote. And I'm like, first of all, we're not gurus.
Right.
First of all, we're not even teachers. We're just two guys being passionate about this subject. And we happen to be working in companies, so that's what we talk about, We got no mission, we got no agenda. We're just...
100%.
And, but I agree in what you say, like, it's just the way you talk about it. And sometimes I go to the message from a neuroscientific perspective, but sometimes also experience based. I'm asking people, well, how do you experience certain things? And I make them think about that. And then at some point when they start asking questions, they figure it out themselves.
Which is ultimately the only thing that's actually going to make a difference is if you ask them on yourself, and that passion drives you to kind of create that escape velocity out of a way of thinking, or enough pain. And so in many ways, this sort of ties back in, because my question was, have you seen an evolution over there in companies?
Not that much. But I realized that anyone recognizes that whenever you're in flow, like reading a book, having sex, watching a movie, all those things, that your self-awareness is switched off.
Right.
That's clear to everyone. You're not aware of yourself. You're only aware of playing tennis or watching Brad Pitt on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And you even feel much better when the self-awareness is switched off. Because the moment it switches on, then all the projections start. Oh, this is me. Am I good enough? What will they think of me? What if I fail? All those things. But when you're in flow, you don't think about, all the clouds are gone. You don't think about all these things. And so you feel liberated while being in flow. And that's why people love to go bungee jumping or dive out of a plane. Because at those moments, you're in flow. That's why people drink alcohol, to put that self-awareness a bit to the background. And so you automatically feel better. And these are things everyone recognizes. And then you don't even have to use the hardcore Indian Advaita philosophy.
Right.
You can just go that way. And I think when I started talking about this 14 years ago, there was an enormous amount of resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when I would give a talk about this, people would get angry, walk out of the room, scream, yell at me, threaten me. I've had everything, sending me big emails with hate messages, but there's more openness, at least in that scene, I feel.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What I would love, sometime maybe we'll discuss that another time. I'd love to know, like what would someone even write in an email like that? When what are they coming after? What are they defending? What's the war that they've started that's already going on in their own mind with you? Right.
Yeah,
and then it came out in the form of an email. It's just so fascinating how someone could want to go to war over this idea, right?
Yes.
It's so wild. It's so wild.
But this takes, like, I've had Christians, like hardcore Christians, and they would get so angry because their whole religion is based upon the idea of good or bad, heaven and hell. And if you look at that idea from a non-dual perspective, there's nothing left, because there is no good or bad. That only is a thought in our brain. And we're all one. There's no separation, so no one can go anywhere.
There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to get. This is it.
Your whole belief system that you've built up for 50 years just falls down instantly. And of course you will experience pain, project that on me, and send me a big email that I will go to hell.
Well, look, you're basically talking about companies. You're talking about the way companies operate, and it just at a different level, because of, my experiences like this. You mentioned just a little while ago, and I actually use this a lot in my work also too. Is that when you're doing these certain things, you're playing a game, or you're doing something that you absolutely love. I love to kite surf, and I know when I'm out there, there's no me. It's just I've become one with this whole thing called kite surfing, and so when I go into companies, a lot of my work has me to identify what will actually naturally create that space or that flow for an individual. What is it that he loves so much that he disappears? Yes. And once he disappears, the drama disappears. He's focused. He's productive. He or she, and then from that place, that's a big part of my work, because most people are completely out of alignment because what they're solving for are clouds and fear. They're not really aligned for, it's like you and I, we're kind of put here to do what we're doing. Not everybody's going to do what we're doing, but for you and me, we get on this and it's all I want to do. Right. And I get on these calls with you, and it's like 20 minutes has gone by and I don't even know what's happened. Right.
True, and that's also what I like with podcasting. Sometimes in the beginning, you're still self-aware,
Right.
and at some point, you dissolve. And that's
Yes.
the same with a comedy show. Like in the beginning, the comedian and the people in the audience are self-aware. And then within a few minutes, that dissolves, and then the flow starts, and then you get a great day. But this is the same with I was having lunch at a restaurant, and there were two people doing a job interview next to me.
Yep.
And they were so close I could hear everything, and they were both so freaking self-aware, and it's so awkward. I could feel it in my stomach. I was like, oh fuck, this is so painful. And the guy, he reads from paper a question like, how do you see yourself in 5 years, or something stupid like that, and the girl was trying so hard to give the correct answer, and I was like, can I have the bill, please? I want to leave.
But in that's so that right there, you can not only hear it, you can feel it.
Yes.
It was kind of what I was trying to describe to you. Sometimes when I start to work with clients and they have there's some energetic feeling or it goes on that allows this opening, where what you just saw was the opposite of that. There's these two people, and you can just feel it. That's really.
It's like having a blind date where you think in 1 second, oh shit, this is not gonna be the one, and then for 2 hours you'll be sitting there asking irrational questions. What kind of work do you do? You got any brothers or sisters? I've had dates like that, and then I would ask, like, imagine you've got $1 million. What would you do? Stupid freaking questions, because it's terrible.
No, wait a minute. Terrible. You've been on a date and someone's asked you that is like on a first date. That's
they
a
would
sign
ask me that,
for me.
and I would say, well, I've got $1 million, and so I would do exactly as I do now. Stupid question.
Oh man! Well, I tell you, this has been great, Paul. We'll end it here, but this may be, I don't know. This may be the start of a rabbit hole series that we come to without specific topics, because I love this conversation today.
Oh, but I
appreciate
enjoy just putting it on record, and this is like words that just come out. There's no effort.
Yeah, it's so good. Well, look. Anybody who wants to get more exposure to this madness, to this craziness that we talk about, please visit us at cloudlessmind.com or subscribe to our YouTube channel as we continue to build that. Paul, again,
yes,
great to be with you, my friend.
Thanks.
All right, brother. Bye-bye.